Hey, Southeast Missouri sports fans. Enjoy the show and want to take it on the go? You can find every episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or YouTube. Tune in as they air by searching SEMO Sports Zone wherever you may be listening. Welcome to the SEMO Sports Zone presented by A Corp Sports. Dave, we are at midweek, and I think we've got a few reactions to have for some of the teams in the area.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a big time of year. We got our first state rankings out. We've got some tournaments rolling out. The Clarkton tournament, the Cena tournament. We have the Bloomfield Christmas tournament and the Cape tournament on the
Tons
horizon.
of tournaments.
So. Yeah, it's and we got Christmas smack right in the middle of everything. Yeah. So it's a fun time of year right now.
Yeah, it's definitely this shakeup of all the sports we have to watch, and then have our own personal lives too.
Yeah,
which is always a hard balance to have, I would say, especially once Christmas rolls around. But state rankings coming out? Mm-hmm. Was there any surprises in there that just kind of threw you off guard?
I was surprised that Richland was state ranked. I mean, I know that they had a good year last year and they're out to a 5-2 start, but their loss to Bell City I thought maybe they would just be one of those teams receiving votes, but they got state ranked, so good for them. And then they backed it up by beating Dexter, so good for them. Outside of that, I mean, Van Buren state ranked. I mean, I don't know if we were expecting that, but I really thought that maybe Woodland or East Prairie might sneak into the top 10, but Class 3 is pretty tough. There's a lot of good teams in Class 3, but yeah, I mean, for the most part, all the teams that were ranked, I thought pretty much deserved it.
Yeah, what I can say about Richland, and I've had this conversation with a few people now, I'm still. I have mixed feelings about Richland at this point because it just depends on what game they play that night. And I think the loss to Bell City, people are taking a little bit rougher than they should, just because, it's early season, it happens. And their loss to Chadwick, I feel like it makes them feel like the team as a whole has the yips a little bit, but I feel like they haven't had a loss since that loss to Bell City. They played Dexter as well as they probably could have. Beat Bell City again. Mm-hmm. So I feel like people are down on Richland when they shouldn't be. It's still a mixed bag team, but it's so early in the season that you can't really, you can't pin anything on them right now. Yeah, the thing about Richland to me is they still don't look very good offensively. There's still something that's not clicking there, but they're winning games. Yeah. And if their offense starts clicking, because they're really defending a lot better this year than they did last year. If they start getting that offense going to go along with this defense, they could be better than they were last year. And again, they didn't start clicking last year till late in the season. So, I'm not worried about Richland. Do I think they're a team that should be state ranked at the moment? No, not really. But they are. So good for them, and they're backing it up with wins, and we'll see how they do in the Christmas tournament. Yeah. Let's talk about that Richland Dexter game really quick, because I feel like seeding should have come out this week instead of last week, because I feel like that opinions might be changing kind of across the board too. With Dexter, they just made so many mistakes.
Yeah, Dexter's got a couple of guys that, can score you 15 or can give you 15 turnovers in the same game. Mm-hmm. I mean, in minute to minute, you don't know what you're going to get from them. Youth, inexperience, on the varsity level. I mean, that's where that all plays in. I think Dexter is very happy that the seeding was done when it was, because I think they would probably, if the seeding was done a week later, this Saturday coming up, I think Dexter might have been
7 seed.
Yeah, I was saying 8. That's what I was going to say. Yeah. It is an 8 seed. So, I don't think just throwing this out there, my hot take, Dexter's there for 3 nights. They're not there for 4. But I could be wrong. And, that Dexter team has the ability to play up and make it all 4 nights and play in a championship game. I mean, they have that ability, but you don't know. There's a few players you just don't know what you're going to get from minute to minute, let alone night to night. So, Coach Allen does a good job with them. But, if you don't know what you're going to get on the floor, just in a lot, just inexperience and just not knowing, just not, being in situations, and then you have inexcusable turnovers and things. Now on the other side, Richland, like we talked about, they're winning these games. They're winning close games. Bell City, the second time they played them, it was a closer game. They they were able to win it.
Yeah.
So you got to be able to pull out these wins. And so good for Richland. I think Richland is a team that got a tough break in the seeding because they're probably better than an 8, and they're playing a Twin Rivers team that I think is going to give them everything they want, because I think that Twin Rivers team is pretty good. So I think it's going to be a battle in that 8-9 game, and just a tough break for Richland that the seeding was done when it was.
Yeah, I definitely feels like, I've seen people say either way. It might go either way between Twin Rivers and Richland. I just don't know. I'm taking Richland in that game. I feel like they absolutely have the potential to do it, and you could see that against Dexter. They can play. If you get a team having a bad night, that shouldn't be emblematic of how well your team is doing, though.
Right.
But as far as Dexter goes, I mean, Dexter's honestly, they're struggling, and what kind of the consensus I've heard is like, well, you can't do worse than you did last year. And I think they've improved from last year, but I haven't seen enough improvement to say that their seeding is correct right now.
No, they were probably seeded too high. I think that win over Charleston was taken. Probably too much weight was put on it. Mm-hmm. I still think they're a good team. I really do. They're playing. I mean, it's not like they're losing to bad teams. They lost to Richland, a state-ranked Richland. They lost to Jackson, a team that they're probably going to lose to. They've lost 21 of the last 23 games to them, so it's not like they're used to beating that team.
Yeah.
You have Woodland up next. They're probably going to lose to Woodland. I mean, Woodland's a very good basketball team. I'm sure we'll talk about them a little bit when we give our rankings, but, they're a very good basketball team, just beat Bernie. So, I mean, it's not like they're not playing really good teams. They're going to be tested when they get into this tournament. It's just that they're not winning these games, and they have a chance to win these games. Last year, they were kind of getting blown out in these games. Now they're playing closer games. They just aren't winning them. They're not doing what they need to do down the stretch to win these games. They should have beat Poplar Bluff. They should have beat Richland, and they didn't. And it's just some turnovers down the stretch, just not making some plays that they need to make. And I think that. I'm not worried about Dexter. I think they're going to have a good year. I think they're going to be right around 500, which is a good year for Dexter because, I mean, you play the SEMO conference schedule. And,
it's tough.
It's tough. Yeah. So, I mean, so I think that's a good year for them. It's just, they were probably seated a little too high in the tournament.
Well, I suppose, let me ask this question. Are my expectations too high, and am I being too critical?
I don't think so, because I think a lot of Dexter people that I've talked to have that. On our show the other day when we had our selection show for the Christmas tournament, it was the same sentiments. It was hey, Dexter probably should be doing they probably should have beaten Poplar Bluff. You can't. I'm like, so you do expect better things from them. They probably should have beaten Richland. I mean, they had the lead late in the game. You need to win those games, but you just can't. I mean, they just didn't make the plays that they needed to make down the stretch. And I think they're a young team. I think that's going to come with time.
What I find frustrating, and I've kind of found this frustrating for a couple of years, is, and I know that it's class difference at this point, but for Stoddard County specifically, why can Dexter not pull the same talent that occasionally Bernie, Woodland, Richland, all those schools can? I
think part of it is Dexter, because back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when they had their run of really, really good basketball teams, 20 straight wins, I can't remember, like 5 or 6 straight years of 20 straight wins. You had a Final Four appearance. You had the Hale teams. You had Coach Sides leading the team to the Final Four district championship games every year. Those guys, for the most part, were basketball guys. They played basketball all the way through, and they didn't play a lot of other sports. I think Dexter with football, Dexter with baseball, Dexter with wrestling, Dexter with soccer now, Dexter with, you've got so many different options. They're not, as younger kids, they're just not playing just basketball. Where Bernie, it's basketball. Where, I mean, you might play some baseball, but for the most part, it's basketball. Puxco, it's basketball. All these other small schools, it's basketball. So you're playing basketball all the way up. And, Dexter just doesn't typically have just your strictly basketball-only players. And I think that probably leads into a little bit of why they typically don't have the dominant type, because there's so many other options. They play so many different sports.
Yeah, well, I feel like at this point, there's some animosity between smaller schools and Dexter. That's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's, I I'm not going to say, oh, poor Dexter, but at the same time, it does kind of feel like you're a little bit bullied in a way of just because like, well, we just don't have that talent. But, like you said, if it's because of dissemination, because of, having more sports, that's something you just kind of have to work through at that point, though.
Yeah, and Dexter, for the most part, I mean, I don't know, I don't have in front of me how many county tournaments they've won as opposed to the other teams, but they're definitely have won more county tournaments than any of the other schools, I would assume. And maybe Bernie, is right up there with them, but for the most part, Dexter's always competing for those county titles, and just like in the Christmas tournament where they're the villain, they're always the villain in the county tournament because they're the big school. Everybody wants to knock the big school off, and everybody raises their game to play them. I promise you that Richland raised their game to play them, and Richland is a tough place to play. On top of that, that's a tough gym to play in. Always has been. Richland always plays well there. So all these teams they kind of ramp up for Dexter, and Dexter usually gets to the team's best because they are the villain. And so losing a game to Richland, like I said, a really good Richland team. I mean, it's not surprising. It didn't surprise me at all when they lost that game. But it's a game that, I'm sure Dexter fans are like, hey, we should probably win this game.
You want to talk about villains in the Starter County Conference. I mean, I'm starting to see Puxico take that role, though, just because, they're very good. They've been very good for this year and last year. Not to say that 2 years is what's going to separate you. It's being like the new, don't like those guys. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of people from Puxico know how good they are, and they're not afraid to demonstrate that point.
Yeah, Puxico's not, typically not the class of the Starter County Conference very often. So, but they are now, and you have this, Dexter's really not the favorite in this thing. So you've got to have a bad guy in every story. You've got to have the bad guy, and so Puxico will be the bad guy because they're the favorite. And like you said, their fans will let you know. I remember back in the 89 season, I believe it was. We had. Brian Blackburn, and you had the really good teams, and the last time I believe they won the district title, or maybe won one since then. But that team back then was really good, and they lost the county tournament to Bernie, and that was a huge game. The game was free throws. Anthony Bean, which a lot of people know around here, hit some free throws with no time left on the clock to send it to overtime, and Bernie won in overtime to knock them off in the county tournament. That was a huge thing. Puxico was a villain then because they were the favorite going in. So it's there's always in the county tournament, there's always that one team that's got to be the bad guy, and usually it's the team that's kind of the favorite.
Well, not to keep talking about Starter County too much, but it is, I believe, the 100th year for the Starter County Conference tournament.
I think so.
So do you think it's kind of poetic in a way that all these teams are at least very competitive and comparable in skill level right now?
I think it's going to be a good year for the 100th tournament. It's going to be a lot of parity in this tournament. I think you could have a final of Puxico Woodland. I think that would be a great.
That's
final.
My expectation right now.
You could have a final of Puxico Richland. You can have a final of Richland. I mean, there's a lot of different scenarios. We're not even talking about Bernie. Bernie can easily get into a final. Dexter could get into a final. I mean, if they start putting it together. There's a lot of different scenarios in that tournament. So that it's going to be a great tournament, and there's going to be a really, really good team lose that first round game. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a really good team lose that first round game. So, and you got Bell City. I didn't even mention Bell City. Bell City's already beat Richland. It's a good tournament top to bottom, and that'll be a blast for the 100th year.
Now, not to discredit your point about Bell City, but I do want to bring this up. Is this one of those situations where they played lights out against Richland and that was lightning in a bottle? Because I haven't seen that same success going forward.
Yeah, I don't know. They played Richland well the second time. They played them well. They didn't, maybe they just match up well against them. Mm-hmm. Losing to Advance, though, you're like, well,
what happened?
What happened?
Yeah.
I think Bell City is a team that's just, sometimes you're not used to success, and sometimes, it takes you a little bit to handle that success. So you win a big game, and all of a sudden you think you're going to roll over the Advanced team, and then you don't prepare the way you should. So that's something that maybe I'm sure they're learning to do. But, Bell City is a team that I wouldn't sleep on at any round in this tournament. Right now they would be my 6th seed in the tournament. But at the same time, I wouldn't, if you're the 3 seed, whoever the 3 seed might be, I certainly wouldn't sleep on them.
Yeah. It's so soon to tell too. And we'll definitely have some answers kind of about where these teams lie, like in relation to each other after the Bloomfield Christmas tournament, of course, just because we're going to get to see, Bernie, Richland, and Dexter all play, and Puxico too. So, I mean, and Puxico state ranked, so obviously they're a big favorite right now.
Yeah, by the time that Christmas or the county tournament rolls around the end of January, we'll have a really good idea of what Bell City's made of and where they factor in.
So I do want to bring this point up too when it comes to state rankings, and it's nobody's fault. Well, it's somebody's fault, but it's not the team's fault. South Pemiscot is state ranked at the time, only playing 2 games. Now they played 3 wins on the season. Do you think that's a fair assessment of where they're at? I know it is not the team's fault that they have got to play so little games, but do you think from what we've seen from their play style, the games they played, do you think their state ranking is completely makes sense?
I'm fine with it. Again, you don't have a big sample size. You're kind of going off. It's basically a preseason ranking. I think you're kind of going off that. But they've done nothing to show me that they don't belong. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, I'm fine with the 7 seed. They might be a 1 or 2 or 3 rank team. They could be a 10th ranked team or not ranked at all. But there's nothing that's shown me that they shouldn't be state ranked, and they beat a very good team last night. And I don't know. I think it's fine.
I only bring that up just because I realize how much the shakeup has caused with kind of local teams too. Because we missed out on a game where at least we could have seen a litmus test, and them being out of the BCT, I think that really does shake up that. Of course, that state ranking with where Puxico is at too. Yeah,
I mean, there's so many good matchups we could have had if South Pemiscot was still in that Christmas tournament, if they would have got to play East Prairie. I mean, there's a lot of, South Pem, these games with South Pem, they're your kind of litmus test because you don't know, you're not going to see them a lot. And, some of these teams dropping them and stuff too. I mean, that's a tough. It's tough. It's going to be tough to kind of, gauge where they're at. I mean, they may be a team that kind of sneaks into the district, and you're really still not sure exactly where they're at. So yeah, it's going to be tough.
Is South Pem on Puxico's schedule currently? I don't have that in front of me.
I don't have that in front of me. I don't think so. Not that I can remember, but they may be. I don't remember seeing them on seeing a game that they would be playing this year unless it was in the Christmas tournament, but I could be wrong.
See, that makes it much harder for Puxico and South Pem to play each other later in the season if they do end up like in postseason, especially, is because you don't really have that in-person reaction or interaction anymore. You're just basing it off film at that point. And, film helps out. Obviously, you can draw a lot of conclusions from it, but you don't really know an opponent until you see them face to face.
Yeah, fortunately, they saw each other face to face last year in that quarterfinal, and pretty much everybody's back. So they do have a little bit of, a gauge there. But yeah, you're right. It's tough to. But I think Puxico's got a lot more to worry about than South Pem, because you've got to get through your district to get to South Pem first, assuming South Pem even gets out of their district. But that district there that Puxico's in is tough.
Well, who do you think is going to give them fits right now?
I think Charleston's going to give them fits. I think Charleston is a team that at the end of the year is going to match up with them and cause them all kinds of problems with their guards and their quickness. I think that's going to be a big problem for Puxico. I'm not saying that Puxico can't beat them, because I think right now Puxico's a better team, but I never count out a Charleston team at district time, and this is a team that just is getting better and better and better. Just watching them, they've improved a lot from that first game against Dexter, and if they continue to get better, like I assume they will, playing a tough schedule like they are, that's going to be a team that is going to be tough to face in district time.
So let's talk about a couple teams that I feel like we might be sleeping on. Crothersville is a team I have highlighted, but have yet to put on my top 10. Do you think I'm kind of in error about that?
No, because I have them in my top 10. So good. I've just been waiting on Crothersville to win a game, and they've done that now. Crothersville played a Poplar Bluff team that we saw at the SEMO Conference Tournament, played them really, really close. They played a Jackson team close. They played a Jackson team closer than Dexter played them. They're a team, I think, that's, definitely flying under the radar, but I think they're a team that's very good. I saw, in the River Bend, I saw a team that was just not basketball ready, just because, you're just off the football field and you're just not ready. But they're a team that I saw that I thought could be very good, and they're a team that I think is going to give East Prairie all they want in that district, and I think that's going to be a team to watch as we go through the year.
Yeah, I'm not hastily scribbling in my notes that somebody should be in my 10 ranking that isn't currently. So kind of to talk about the broadcast that we had last night, started with the Clarkton tournament. Not a lot of matchups that I really consider marquee. One that I was really surprised by, though, was Portageville and Greenville. And in that game, just like a 1-point difference.
Yeah. I mean, that was a heck of a game, wasn't it? 57-56, and, two pretty much evenly matched teams right there.
Yeah, and, for kind of to think about where I was drawing conclusions from, I mean, I was drawing them from where Portageville was seated in the BCT, which whether that should stand or not, I don't know. But to play Greenville that close, I wasn't expecting a blowout, but I was not expecting Portageville to win that game.
Yeah, I wasn't sure because I don't know. I just don't know a ton about Greenville. I've seen some of their scores, and I don't know exactly how they match up against some of these teams. So it's good to see them play like a Portageville, so we can kind of get some measuring sticks here. But I thought it was a good win for Portageville. Anytime you can win a game like that, a close game like that, I mean that's good for your team, good for your confidence. And winning close games goes a long way toward building a ton of confidence. And so good for Portageville. We'll see how they do against Risco. I think Risco probably takes care of them, but at the same time, Portageville is a team that can kind of sneak up on you.
Is that the matchup? Is it?
I think.
Sorry. That's starting tomorrow. I'm still thinking about BCT. I'm thinking about because I'm thinking about how does Portageville match up with Bernie at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of anxious to see how they match up against Risco first, and then we'll see how they. I think they're going to struggle with these teams that can score a little bit because I don't know if they can. I don't know if Portageville can put up the points that they're going to need to put up to beat a team like Risco, or maybe a team like Bernie. But it all depends, kind of the way the game is played. Can they play it at a slower pace, which I think Portageville is going to need to do because I just don't see them outscoring a lot of teams.
Well, Portageville, from what I saw, had moments of really outscoring their opponent. Zay Bogan put up 14 by the half, but in the third, he was just completely quiet. And Greenville just kind of matched them on that point spread pretty quickly. So, I don't know. I don't know if Portageville can really rack up a score. So they probably are going to have to play a slower tempo just because of that. Yeah,
I think so. And, I like Zay Bogan. The only problem with him is he's 5'7", and it's really tough for a guy who's 5'7" to consistently get shots. And it's just, I mean, no matter how quick you are, unless you're getting some steals and easy layups, I mean, it's really tough to get shots against some of these teams that they're going to be playing, some of these tougher teams. But I think Portageville is going to be fine as the season goes along. I think they'll get some wins. It's not going to be their best year by any means, but I think they're a team that you better not take lightly.
So let's talk about two teams that were typically in the BCT. One is not, Hayti and Twin Rivers. I didn't expect Twin Rivers to play Hayti that close.
I did. I'm very high on Twin Rivers. They'd won 5 in a row coming in. They're a team that returns quite a bit from last year. The Hester boys are good players. I mean, they're a team that I think is another team that's just kind of flying under the radar. They're not getting a lot of attention, but again, they'd won 5 in a row going up against this Hayti team. Hayti is playing very well right now. Very athletic, and Twin Rivers hung with them, and I think that bodes well for them come the Christmas tournament. But what I like to look at even more than that is the 5 wins in a row leading up to that game. They know how to win, and they're not the most talented team in the world, but they're a team that they kind of play within themselves, and I think they're a team that's going to cause a lot of teams some fits. And like I said, Richland in that first round game, I think that's going to be a tough game for both teams. I mean, for both teams, that's going to be a game in that Christmas tournament that I think people are going to want to see.
Yeah, the more I look at it, the more I think that this is a good matchup. I mean, some people might be disappointed that Twin Rivers has the 9 seed. Some people might be disappointed that Richland has the 8 seed. But I do think these are two teams that are of pretty much the same skill level. And so to see them match up that first day, I think that's going to be a good game just to see who would move on from that.
Yeah, I think that's the 11:15 game too, so it'll be the second game of the day. I mean, so that's going to be a good game to kind of get you really going in this Bloomfield Christmas tournament.
It's definitely the hinge point that I think a lot of us that filled out brackets in the office kind of have just like, well, it's either this or everything I predicted is just a wash.
Yep. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about that, later on in another podcast, but I'm with you there.
So another game I can't really use as a litmus test just because of the kind of point spread, but East Carter 96, North Pemiscot 20. But we don't really have that many looks at East Carter is the problem.
Yeah, and that look doesn't count. So the only look that I see that counts is that Donovan game. They're going to get to play them again now, so we'll see how they match up a second time. But you can't, a game that you win by 76 points, you really can't take much from that. At the same time, East Carter, I think they should be good. I mean, I know there are a lot of juniors. I think they start 4 juniors, if I'm not mistaken, and they've got the big kid inside, they've got the stall kid outside. I mean, they've got a pretty good mix of players. It surprised me when they lost to Donovan the first time. We'll see how they match up, on Thursday night and see how they do there. I'm very interested in seeing that game and seeing how they handle that Donovan game a second time.
Yeah, I mean, kind of what I've heard from everybody is that they think that East Carter was seated too low. I don't know. But to lose to Donovan, I mean, it just makes sense where you're placed in the seating then. I'd maybe put them over Bloomfield, but I don't. Until I see them play Donovan again, I don't really have any concrete.
Yeah, let's watch them play. Let's watch them play Donovan again because I just don't have I don't have an opinion on them. I think they're a good team. I thought they were a really good team going up to that. I had them as a higher seed going, before that Donovan game when they lost to Donovan. That kind of changed things because I had Donovan as one of the lower seeds. Mm-hmm. So obviously that changed things and it changed the seeding for the coaches as well. So we'll see, when they play a second time, if East Carter comes out and beats them by 20, then it's like, okay, that could have just been an anomaly. If it's another close game or Donovan ends up winning again, then maybe, the teams that they've beaten just aren't what we think they are. Maybe Donovan's better than what we think they are. So it's still so early in the year. It's just so tough to judge some of these teams.
Yeah. And, let's talk about Donovan and Clarkton then, 72-56. Because I don't see Clarkton as being a bad team right now either. Just kind of, you work with what you got.
Yeah. And I agree. I think Clarkton, I think Clarkton rolls through North Pemmiscott. They're going to play Greenville. That's going to be a heck of a game. I think that's two evenly matched teams right there. So that's going to be a good game in there in that constellation. Again, like you said, I don't think Clarkton's a bad team. I think, but again, I haven't seen them enough to make a big judgment on them.
Yeah, and I mean, the unfortunate thing is a lot for these like lower classes is you're hinged on, what happens that day with a kid that's on your team. And, for some schools, like losing a piece isn't really that big of a deal. You've got somebody who can fill in immediately. But for these smaller schools, you lose 2 big pieces. Then you're kind of just having to scramble to put a piece back together. And I think Clarkton ends up dealing with that a lot more than, they're warranted. But I feel like for that, they're dealing with it in the best way possible.
Yeah, and they've got a good coach. He does a good job with them. They're a well coached team always. It's just you deal with what the hand you've been dealt. So I think that, but I really think that their game against Greenville is going to tell me a lot about both teams, and I think that's going to be a heck of a game.
Now we discussed it earlier, but I want to bring this point up. Are we not looking at Gideon enough to go 69-66 over Cooter?
I mean, I don't know how good Cooter is. I mean, it's good. It's good that Gideon gets a win, and it's because I do think. I mean, if gun to my head, they're better than Holcomb. I mean, but when you go into the seedings and you haven't won a game and the other teams have won a game, you're probably going to get the lower seed. It's just the way. It's just the way of the world. And do I think Gideon's a 16 seed for this tournament? No, I don't. I think they're probably better than Malden as well. But sometimes you are what your record says you are, and they've not won some of these games. But do I think that they're just an awful basketball team? I do not. I think they're better than they were last year, and I think they're probably one of the best 16 seeds we've had in this Christmas tournament in a long time. It's just tough the games that you had played, and again we go back to the seeding and when it's done, and I mean you have to do it then. But at the same time, some of these teams just aren't going to have. You're not going to get the full scope of how good or bad they are in that short amount of time.
Yeah, I did, and like I said with Clarkton, I feel like it's part and parcel. What do you have to work with? And I feel like Gideon's had a rough few years with that. So right now to kind of hear the conversation being like they're the 16th seed, yes, they could easily be the 15th, 14th, possibly the 13th if they played well enough. I just feel like it's the opponents that you faced. And we're kind of with a lot of sports in general too. It's becoming the argument of, well, do games matter? And I think they do. I don't feel like you should really judge a team just based off of, the number next to their name at this point.
No, absolutely not. And, I feel bad for Gideon because, you get Puxco in the first round. And
you just feel like a punching bag.
And then you get to play either Richland or Twin Rivers.
Yeah.
So, have fun with that.
Yeah.
I mean, those are good teams too to play. And again, like I said, I don't think they're a team that should be, one of the top 8-10 seeds. At the same time, I mean, they're not a 16 team in my opinion, and weren't when they were seeded that way. But you got to seed all 16 teams, and you got to put them somewhere. And it just, it's just unlucky. But again, I don't think they're a terrible basketball team, but they're just a basketball team that has played some tough teams.
So let's move on to top 10 power rankings.
What you got?
Number one's Puxico.
I think we're agreed there. I mean, state ranked, they're number 5 in Class 2, and I mean, they've done nothing to tell us that they shouldn't be state ranked. I mean, they're just kind of rolling all along, and nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, they're having the season that everybody expected them to. I still look at them a little wary, though, knowing that could easily be not usurped by any specific team, but I don't know. I'm tentative on to say, like, yeah, you're the best team in the area.
Yeah, they'll be tested. I mean, they're going to be tested in this Christmas tournament. They're going to be tested in the county tournament. They're going to be tested all season long. I mean, so we'll know by the end of the year, but right now, I mean, they've passed all their tests that they've had. So, I mean, I think they're kind of the most talked about team around the area. But I think right now they're my one.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not a situation of saying like, well, who have you played? Because they played Chadwick, obviously. Mm-hmm. So, they, for their wins are good wins. And like you said, I just have to pick them as number one. My number 2 is Woodland.
And my number 2, Scott City. I mean, they just beat they beat down Kelly. And again, they're still missing one of their best players. They've got balanced scoring across the board. I think they're a team that's going to make a big run in Class 3, and they're state ranked number 6 in state, but yeah, I think that's a team that is going to be really good, and I'm still looking for them to make a run in this Cape tournament.
No, my expectations for Scott City are pretty much where yours are at. I just think Woodland looks really good right now, and so my 2, 3, and 4 are all very close. So I could mix and match those anywhere, and that might change week to week at this point. On that note, my number 3, I've taken South Penn.
My number 3, I've got Woodland for just the reasons that you said. They look really good. I think they beat Dexter on Friday night. I think, and I think they're another team that's going to, possibly do really well. I mean, they should match up against Charleston in the, I believe, and I don't have it in front of me, but I think they match up against Charleston if seeds hold true in the Cape tournament, the Cape Christmas tournament. And I think they're going to give Charleston everything they want and more. I think they're a team that, I just think they're a really, really good team. And like you said, I mean, so I got them as my 3.
Very underrated. Mm-hmm. And I don't see many people talking about them, which I don't know if that just has to do with where they're at in Stoddard County, but I feel like they should be in the conversation a lot more.
Yeah, they're not even in Stoddard County. That's always been funny to me. They're not they put them in years and years ago back in, I believe, in the 70s. But I mean, I think, they're just, Woodland has never really been a team that people really talk about. And I think they had a team, several years back that was pretty good, but that was when Bloomfield was really good. So they kind of got overshadowed by Bloomfield. They've never won a county tournament.
Really?
They've never won one. So, I mean, it's they've only made the championship just a few times, and but yeah. So, I mean, it's one of those things where, I mean, I just think that you're not used to them being in the conversation, and they are definitely in the conversation now, and they've got some really good players.
Yeah, and it's not like I'm not guilty of that. I mean, when we put out our first power ranking for basketball, people said, "Why don't you have Woodland on your list?" And yeah, I forgot.
Yeah, and I mean, they had a really good win over Bernie the other night. I mean, and Bernie played them tough, but Woodland kind of pulled away at the end, and we know Bernie's a good team. So
Bernie's missing some pieces now too, which
that hurts them. That's going to hurt them. But
so like I said, my number 3 is South Penn. My number 4 is Scott City.
My number 4 is East Prairie. I really, East Prairie is another team that's not done anything to not be getting recognized and getting ranked and anything. They continue to win. Their defense continues to get better and better. Gideon scored most points on them as any team. I mean, they held Hayti to 65, and then they've been holding everybody else to under 50. I mean, I'm very impressed with their defense. And so, and we know they can score. I mean, they've got 3 very good scorers. So, I've got them as my 4. And then, you go to my 5, and you've already mentioned them, South Pemiscot. And like you said, my 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all those teams, you can jumble them up and choose them out of the hat different next week, and I would be fine with it.
See, my number 5, I took Hayti just because I feel like their loss to East Prairie was, bad for that moment, but they don't feel like they missed a step. They've kind of regrouped and, just outplayed everybody that they've gone up against.
So my 5th is South Pemiscot. My 6th, I've got Crothersville. When we talked about them, I think they're a really good team. I think they're a team that's played a really tough schedule, so the record doesn't necessarily show what they really are. I mean, the team. I can't remember the team right off the top of my head. They played in Riverbend, but they were really good. Obviously, Poplar Bluff.
West Memphis, wasn't it?
Yeah, West Memphis. There you go. West Memphis. And then you had Jackson. And then, who obviously is a good SEMO Conference team. Poplar Bluff, we saw these are really good teams that they played. So their losses are good losses. And with the exception of the Riverbend game, they've not been blown out of any game. Yeah. So, and they continue to get better and better and better. They just beat a team out of Tennessee, a team that's usually pretty good. So, yeah, I have Crothersville as my number 6.
And I took East Prairie for my number 6. My number 7, I've taken Risco.
At my number 7, I've got Campbell. I mean, got a tournament win. They continue just to win games, and they look good. So, I know they kind of struggled a little bit with Malden. I don't put a whole lot of credence into that, though, because it was homecoming night. They had like some Hall of Fame stuff going on before the game. It just, you have a lot of distractions, and sometimes you don't, sometimes you don't always just focus in. But I think they're a really good team, and I think they're a team that's, they've beaten some of these teams I got below them. So
yeah, and I took Campbell for my number 8. Just for me right now. I mean, I'll have to see how Risco plays against, kind of looking ahead. If I can figure it's probably going to end up being like a Risco East Carter game at the end of the Clarkson tournament, I'm not really sure, but I'd like to see them play a little bit more before I can push them anywhere else on the ranking. But I think Risco Campbell, I could switch either one.
Yeah.
My number 9, I've taken Charleston.
Okay, so my 8 is Hayti. So I've got Hayti at 8, and then my number 9 is Bernie. And I know they've lost some pieces, so they're still in there. But the win over Risco keeps them ahead of Risco. So I'd probably tell you who my number 10 is. But so everybody's just, again, all these teams on the bottom, they're kind of jumbled in there too. It's just, you can take any of these teams, and it's just a week to week thing.
Yeah, and my rankings in that sense might not make much sense because I don't even have Bernie on my ranking right now, and they've beaten Risco. But I don't know. It's one of those things, and I want Bernie to succeed, but at the same time, it's just I have to kind of admit to myself that, hey, that might have been a flash in the pan game, but who knows? So my number 10, I've taken Richland. For a 10A and a 10B, I've taken Crothersville.
Yeah, I've got Risco as my number 10, and then if I had an 11, that would be Richland. But yeah, I've got Risco as my 10, and those are the top 10. And I don't know if if you put a gun to my head and had me pick tomorrow, I would pick a completely different.
It's a struggle.
It'd be a different. But that's just the way I picked them today before we did the show, and again, tomorrow might be something different, a different order.
Well, it doesn't help that there's like 70 teams in the area too that you have to pick and choose from and just see like, okay, what's your record? Who'd you play? But yeah, like you said, this could switch any day now. To have this many games too going on at the same time, that's why we split the show up into twice a week, just because
there's so much going on.
There's so much going on.
So much going on.
So let's talk about large schools, but I think this is going to be a faster list.
Yeah, I can read you my list real quick, and I bet it's pretty much the same as yours. I've got Sykeston, Cape Central, Jackson, Notre Dame, and Poplar Bluff.
Yep.
And again, it's probably going to stay that way probably through these Christmas tournaments because there's really nobody. I am anxious. Sykeston number 1 in Class 5. We didn't mention them. We were talking about state rankings. But they're number 1 in Class 5, which is probably well deserved.
Yeah.
and they get to play number 1 Principia in Class 3. They're going to play them on Sunday in Springfield. So that ought to be a good litmus test. I think that's going to be a good test for Sykeston to see how, where they're at, because that Principia team is very good. They've got a lot of size. They've got a lot of kids who can get to the rim. They're going to be tough to guard. And so I think that's going to be a really, really good game. And so I think that's going to be a good test for Sykeston. And Cape Central and Jackson, Jackson just, handled Dexter Koldeck. He had 32 the other night.
He had a great game.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's still hitting shots, in that game. Notre Dame, Notre Dame gets Sykeston on Friday night. Have fun with that. And we saw how it happened the first time. These are a lot of, we kind of know what's going to happen here.
Yeah. So let me ask this question. If Sykeston's number 1 in Class 5, who's number 2?
I think Vianney's number 2, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have it in front of me.
Interesting.
But that District 2 up there is going to be really tough, because you've got Vianney, who's ranked, and I don't have the rankings in front of me, but I'm pretty sure Vianney was number 2, and then Webster Groves, I believe, is maybe 6 or 7, and then you've got St. Mary's, who's getting votes, and their best player's injured. And he's probably one of the best players in Missouri. And so whenever he gets back, and he should be back pretty soon, only one of those three teams is coming out of that district. And they are all very good teams. You got John Burroughs in Class 5. That's going to be good. Class 5 is loaded this year. Class 5 is a lot like Class 2 to me, with some really, really good teams.
Yeah, I think for Sykeston right now, they need a game to be tested. You do not need to play these games where you're winning by 30-point blowouts. It's great for your ego, but is it great for your play? Is it great for taking mistakes and learning from them? Probably not. So, when Holyfield squad has to play these bigger teams, like you said, Principia, I kind of want them to play a close game just so they know, hey, further in the season, because I feel like that's something that really got them last year was you play against Vianney. Vianney played a different game. They kind of just bullied you the entire time. You got to know how to cope with that and, eke out your wins.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's part of their thinking this year is they've beefed up that schedule a little bit. You're playing some of these tougher teams. And so good for them that they are trying to, they do realize they've got to beef up that schedule a little bit. Sometimes it's hard getting teams to play you. And I know that they really worked hard last year to try to get a Vashon game and some other games. They couldn't get it worked out. And so this year they were able to get some of these games like this Principia over in Springfield. And that's going to be a really, really good test for Sykeston. And they've got a few more on their schedule. The St. Dominic tournament, I saw the seeds today. Obviously Sykeston's the top seed in that. It doesn't look like a super tough tournament this year as some of the teams in the, I don't know how good. I think Timberland's the number 2 seed in that thing. I don't know how good they are, but I wouldn't think that doesn't sound like a team that's usually a big threat. So, you want to get some of these games that you've scheduled, Father Tolton, games like that you're going to be playing this year to really test you, because I think in some of these games that you normally have scheduled, that where you normally get tested, they might not be as strong, like SEMO Conference tournament, the St. Dominic tournament, things like that.
Yeah, I love the SEMO Conference, but it is not a good test of skill for Sykeston right now.
Yeah, not this year.
So I kind of want to ask this question just because it's been on my mind. If there was one team, if you had the option and the opportunity to pick the teams for BCT, what's one team that you would like to add?
One team I would like to add. I would have said Risco, honestly. That would have been the team I would have liked to have added before this year. If you're talking about this 16 group, and I get to kick a team out and I get to add a team, it would probably be maybe I don't know. I feel like an Advance, which, I know they're not very good this year, but in years past, they've always been a team that I felt like belonged in this tournament. For some reason, I know that they played it in a long time ago. Maybe an Advance or I don't know. Because you don't want their bigger schools in there. Because they would pretty much dominate it most of the time. So you'd want a team that would be in there and would have a chance to do well, but not always run the table. And I think Advance kind of fits that. They would have done well many years, but they wouldn't have been a team that would just have just won it every year or something.
See, I've heard people say, obviously there's it's probably not going to happen this way, but people have been saying Oran would be one to
Oran
consider.
be another one. Oran, yeah. I mean, I could see them. I know they were back in it in the late 60s, early 70s. They were in it for a while, and so yeah, I can. Matter of fact, I think they were in it all the way up through the early 80s. So yeah, they're another team that I mean, they kind of fit that mold. Bell City is one that kind of would fit that mold, just a smaller school that, but those schools aren't leaving that Cape tournament.
No.
From the deal they have set up there, they're not leaving that tournament up there. But yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing any of those teams. I think those teams would typically in a regular year, do pretty well.
Now, I would pose this argument, and let's not take the next few years into account. Let's take this year. I would like to see New Madrid play.
Yeah. I
mean,
this
year, not next year or the year after that. That's not what I'm considering. I'm just considering skill levels at this year right now.
So I watched them play last night against Kennett. They're very young, very young. They turn the ball over a lot. Kennett pretty much took it to them, led the entire way for the most part. A lot of free throws. Kennett hit 27 to 35 free throws. Mm-hmm. A lot of free throws. New Madrid is just very young. I'm kind of thinking where they would be slotted in as a seed, maybe a 9 or 10 seed. I mean,
right now, really?
Yeah, I don't think they would be a super high seed just because I don't think that. I mean, you just lost to Kennett, who was a 5 seed. You lost to them, by 10.
So how do you think they would stack up against Richland as they are right now?
I think Richland would cause them a lot of problems with their defense. I think New Madrid would turn it over a lot. I don't know if Richland could beat them, but I think if you match up their record, which is 1-7, New Madrid's 1-7 up to 5-2, which is you kind of look at that. I think New Madrid would probably play all 4 nights. But I don't think they would win. I think they might go 2-2. Somehow, some way, no matter where they were seated, I think they'd be a 2-2 team.
I just think they'd play a very different up-tempo basketball to a lot of people. I don't know where they would end up. I speculate on seeding. I would have said 5 if it were up to me.
And come to think of it, they had beaten Kennett right before then, so they probably would have slid into that 5. You're probably right there, because last night's game wouldn't have been taken into consideration. I didn't. Honestly, in the tournament, the SEMO Conference tournament, I was not as impressed with them as I was Kennett. Kennett just had the misfortune of playing 3 games in 3 nights, and then you try to play a team like New Madrid who is going to go full court. It does take a lot out of you, and you could tell just by looking at the box score that game against Kennett. Kennett just kind of lost their legs. Watson didn't even score in the fourth quarter. They just kind of they just lost their legs a little bit and just couldn't finish it off. And they'd played so hard that entire tournament. I kind of was expecting Kennett to win the game last night, and they did. And I'm high on this Kennett team, but because I think they just get better and better. I think Coach McBroom's doing a fantastic job with them, and they've got 7. Their biggest issue is they only go 7 deep. But on the New Madrid thing is New Madrid they're young, and I know they're kind of phasing some of the freshmen out a little bit. The 2 big kids did not play varsity last night. They didn't get any minutes. They had some great minutes off the bench from some of their seniors, Riley Harden for one, and they had some. He's a 6'5" senior, and he gave them some really good minutes. I believe he had 12 points, and but I don't think that they're a team that I think they would be like I said, about a 2-2 team in the tournament this year. Then you put them in next year and they could run it for the next 3-4 years, So, but yeah, this year wouldn't be one of those years.
Yeah. That's why I'm saying this year. Cause honestly, we can only speculate what the situation is for Bloomfield of who's going to stay in, like with the shakeup, like is Risco going to stay in permanently? Is East Carter going to stay in permanently? We have no idea. So, just thought processes that go through my head of like, oh, well, who could slot in? Like who's available? Things like that.
Right.
And, everybody wants to be in the BCT.
So there's a lot of teams. There's a pretty good waiting list there for sure.
But to me, like to your point on Kennett is I love Kennett this year just because I've got no expectation for them and the things they can, the way they change to fit a situation and just kind of roll with it. I like watching it. I like seeing what might happen, even if it ends up in a loss. Yeah,
Dyson Watson is so much fun to watch play because it just seems like there's no effort there at all. I mean, as far as just to what he's doing, and he kind of changes speeds. He can dribble the ball really well. He can get to the rim. He can pull up and hit a jumper. I mean, he hits free throws. I mean, he's offensively, he is about as well rounded as you're going to find. I think he's going to have a field day in this Christmas tournament. I think that they roll through East Carter. I really do. I could be wrong, but I know I've got some people on our selection show that don't think that. But I'm very high on Kennett. I am. I really think that I've got them finishing third place in the tournament. Honestly, I think their biggest thing is their depth, and I think they've. I look at the bracket. I think it sets up well. I don't think they can beat Puxico. I don't. I think Puxico's better. But at the same time, if you told me Kennett's in the championship, a week from now or week and a half from now, you tell me Kennett's in the championship, I'd be like, yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. Let me jot that down and just see kind of what your thoughts are when we get after the tournament. And
watch them get just pounded in that first round game. They're 2-out, and I'll be like, yeah, I'm off that bandwagon real quick. But I'm really, I've watched them play in the SEMO Conference tournament, watching them play the other night. They're just a team, and they get better every time I see them.
Mm-hmm. All right, just to round the show off, is there any game this week that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, there's actually several games on Friday night. One of them is the Dexter Woodland game. I'm anxious to see what Woodland looks like.
Taking mine.
Yeah, sorry about that. I got a few others. I mean, the Kennett Charleston game too. I mean, the Kennett Charleston game. I mean, again, we're talking about how good can Kennett be. They beat Charleston, in the SEMO Conference tournament.
Can you do it again?
Can you do it again on Charleston's home floor? Because Charleston's going to be out for blood, and that Charleston always plays well at Charleston. So I'm anxious to that, and then a game that's a little bit out of the area, but it's kind of close, and it kind of has some is South Iron and Chadwick that play late on Friday night out over in Springfield in the same event that Sykes is going to be playing in. I'm anxious to see that game just to see how Puxico beat Chadwick. How does South Iron match up against this Chadwick team? Because those are two teams that could match up later on down the line.
Yeah, like you said, Dexter Woodland. That's the one I've just been looking forward to. But any championship of any tournament game is probably going to be worth a watch. So I'll look forward to those.
Yeah, and that Briscoe against either Doniphan or East Carter. I'm assuming it's Briscoe against Doniphan or East Carter. I mean, that's going to be. I think that'll be a good game. I really do. I really think that Richland is a team that's fun to watch, and I think these Doniphan and East Carter teams. It's a good test for what we're going to see in this Christmas tournament, and I think that'll be just a fun game, I think, to watch.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of what the Clarkton tournament's for. At this point is to kind of showcase what's going to go on in the next couple of weeks, and to see 4 of those teams that were in the BCT. It's a good litmus test to just kind of see what's our expectations going forward.
Yeah, and I've always liked that Clarkton tournament. I've been able to go to a couple of championship games there. There's always a great atmosphere there. It's kind of a smaller gym, and everybody's kind of packed in there for that championship night. And there's the cheering is really loud. I mean, it's a fun event, and it's a fun, especially on that championship night. There
is something about that gym too. When you walk into it, it's like the smell. I don't know if it's because they've still got wood benches, things like that, but it just smells like this is what high school basketball smells like to me. And I just get hit with that wave of nostalgia.
There's that gym and Risco. Both of those gyms, I walk in them, it feels like small school basketball. It does. It just really feels like small school basketball, and it's a nice feeling. It's a nice.
It's very cozy.
Yeah, cozy. That's a good word for it. It's just a really nice feeling, and there's just 2 good places to watch a basketball game.
All right. Any final thoughts?
No, I'm just ready. I'm ready to get this week over and get Christmas, in the books, and get to this Christmas tournament because, as we get closer and closer, I'm getting excited.
Yeah, I'm sure Sunday we'll talk more about the Christmas tournaments that are going to be going on in the next week, and then. Man, it's all just coming up so quickly.
Yeah, once Thanksgiving is over, between Thanksgiving and Christmas, whether it's like games or just personal things, it just seems like there's so many things: Christmas parties, Christmas pageants, Christmas programs, Christmas this, all different kinds of things. You're so busy all the time; it just flies by.
Yeah, exactly. All right, that'll do it for the show. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you Monday morning.